Now I want you all to cast your minds back to 2010. I mean, the world was a very different place. Apple had just launched its brand new tablet called the iPad, Katy Perry released the album Teenage Dream, and the late Kobe Bryant had just won his 5th NBA championship. And sandwiched into what was a pretty historic year for pop culture, also came the announcement on November 8th, 2010 that The Walking Dead would be renewed for a second season. And as we know, the franchise would blossom over the coming decade, becoming at one point the most viewed show in television history, spawning numerous spin-off shows and having 11 seasons of its own. And The Walking Dead really has gone on to become AMC's golden child as such. But it hasn't always been this way. In fact, The Walking Dead almost ceased to exist entirely during its early days. So today I thought we'd delve into the turbulent birth of one of the greatest shows ever created and explore how a singular actor saved an entire franchise. This is how Jon Bernthal saved The Walking Dead. Now, as I alluded to in the intro, The Walking Dead had a very turbulent start to life. So, I'm going to go over a brief timeline of events to paint a clearer picture. In 2009, The Walking Dead comics creator Robert Kirkman came together with Hollywood blockbuster director Frank Darabont to turn his vastly popular comic books into a television series, and work swiftly began. By January of 2010, AMC picked up the series, and by October of the very same year, the pilot episode was aired on Halloween night, garnering millions of viewers and critical acclaim. It was a roaring success, and after 5 more phenomenal episodes, season 1 of The Walking Dead was finished, and AMC quickly announced the show would be renewed for a second season. And so far, so good. The show was a colossal hit, the cast were absolutely phenomenal, and behind it all, they had one of the best directors in the business. So what could possibly go wrong? Well, in July 2011, everything came crashing down. Frank Darabont, the director and the showrunner, was suddenly fired during season 2's early stages of production, and a fierce legal battle would ensue between Frank and AMC. Following Darabont's dismissal, a man by the name of Glenn Mazzara was appointed the showrunner, stepping up from his role as executive producer. But to understand the severity of the situation, I'm going to break some things down. Firstly, the whole reason Darabont was fired was over budgeting issues. He wanted to explore the fall of Atlanta in a bottle episode, keep the story more faithful to the comics, have more capable walkers, and have larger set pieces and zombie scenes throughout season 2. But AMC refused. In fact, despite the show's episode count jumping from just 6 in season 1 all the way to 13 in season 2, AMC decided to cut the budget of the series. A baffling decision at the time. Secondly, Glenn Mazzara was thrust into the showrunner position, with his only experience of this job title being the subpar series of Crash in 2008. And on top of all of this, the scripts changed and the direction of season 2 was altered drastically, just 3 months before episode 1 was meant to air on television. So the show had a tight budget, was running on an incredibly marginal timeline, and had a director who was extremely inexperienced. All signs pointed to season 2 of The Walking Dead not just being a complete disaster, but also the last in the series. In fact, Sam Witwer, who played the Walker in the tank during season 1's pilot episode, was supposed to have a whole episode dedicated to him in season 2, showing his backstory and to demonstrate that every Walker in the series was a real person. Ultimately, after the budget dispute, his episode was entirely cut from the series, and his only appearance in the entire show was that as the Walker in the tank in season 1. In an interview, Sam Witwer stated not only was he left devastated by his part of season 2 being cut, but also behind the scenes the show was extremely ugly and posed a hostile environment to work in. So it really did look like The Walking Dead was going to be over before it had even really began. But season 2 aired, and it shocked absolutely everybody. On October 16th, 2011, episode 1 of season 2 aired, and to the shock of absolutely everybody, it was really good. Episode after episode would drop and people were just waiting for the wheels to fall off. But that would never happen. In fact, season 2 of the series would nearly double the viewership and shatter cable television ratings, resulting in AMC renewing it for a season 3. So how did a show that looked destined to fail behind the scenes come out as not just good, but one of the best seasons of television ever created? Well, firstly, Glenn Mazzara deserves a huge shout out here. Although inexperienced, he managed to lean into the lack of budget. Season 1 of The Walking Dead was a visual spectacle, whether it was Rick riding into the now abandoned Atlanta or the explosion at the CDC, it absolutely wowed fans. But Season 2 doesn't have these grand set pieces or huge action sequences, bar the season finale where Herschel's farm burns down. And Season 2 plays into its own strengths, that being its incredible cast. The season was nearly entirely shot in one location, that being Herschel Green's farm, which gave this incredibly homely feel to it. Mix this in with the iconic grainy camera filter, and Season 2 to me just feels warm and nostalgic. But the fact nearly the entirety of the season was shot in one location saved a huge portion of the show's budget. It also leaned into a slower paced story dictated by character dialogue, a bold but ultimately necessary move from the series. It was a slow burn, tense build up to the chaotic and fulfilling season finale. But it took great amount of time to establish and flesh out key characters within the story. Daryl, Carol, Herschel, Dale, Maggie and Glenn, there were just so many intriguing dynamics in this season of television, which made it absolutely fascinating to watch. But without a doubt, the greatest dynamic of not just this season, but arguably the entire series, is the Rick and Shane dynamic. Now, this specific dynamic encapsulates everything the show represents: the journey from brothers to rivals, the difference in their views on leadership, and the complete collapse of Shane as a character. And these are what make Season 2 utterly phenomenal in my opinion, and make it my personal favourite season of television ever created. And I could also just talk about my love for Season 2 and the brilliance of the dynamics within it forever. In fact, I have many times on this channel, but beneath what we see portrayed on screen, I truly believe it's Jon Bernthal, the actor who portrays Shane Walsh, we have to thank for the series surviving past Season 2. But why is this? As mentioned earlier, Season 2 could have gone either way. The almost singular location of the farm, the dialogue heavy episodes, and the lack of walkers could have caused the show to become stagnant and boring. And whilst yes, some people do feel this way about Season 2, the vast majority agree that it's a complete masterpiece. And at the centre of this masterpiece is the character of Shane Walsh. Season 1 of the series was about survival, with the only real threat coming from the walkers themselves, but Season 2 delves into the themes of human morality and a clash in ideologies that ultimately turn deadly. See, Shane drives the story forward, posing us the first real antagonist of the series. Clashing with Rick and changing the characters around him, I very much think Season 1 of the show belonged to Rick Grimes, his journey to find his family and his betrayal of leadership, but Season 2 I think shifts that main focus over to Shane Walsh, and although Rick's our protagonist, much of the episodes focus in on Shane's psyche and his descent into chaos, and Jon Bernthal, the actor, portrays this role masterfully. He sets the tone for the entire cast. I mean, we all know how good Andrew Lincoln was at portraying Rick Grimes, and the fact he didn't win an Emmy for his portrayal of the character to this day still baffles me. And don't get me wrong, him and the entire cast are superb across Season 2. But in a time when The Walking Dead was make or break, it's Jon Bernthal who I believe gave us the standout performance. He was the factor that drove the show onto greatness and ultimately got it renewed for Season 3, which hence allowed other characters to pick up in his absence after his character's death. I think the character of Shane Walsh is the ultimate make or break factor from Season 2 of the show. If he's not compelling as an antagonist, the dialogue heavy scenes don't work, the delve into his psyche feel boring, and the payoff at the end is unsatisfying. I think the show was a complete mess behind the scenes, and it lay in the hands of our cast, and Jon Bernthal and the rest of them recognised this fact, and they all gave the performance of a lifetime. Now, I'd quickly like to talk about two podcasts that feature Jon Bernthal and what he said on them. Firstly, episode 1916 of Joe Rogan's podcast, in which Jon explains what it was like working on the early seasons of The Walking Dead. He explains the cast was so driven and hungry, and arguably the most talented group he'd ever worked with. And once again, I think due to everything going on behind the scenes, it would have been easy for some of the actors to bail or not give 100% on screen, but they understood the potential this show had. And if they could weather the storm until things became more stable behind the scenes, then they could create something really special. and ultimately they would go on to do just that. And secondly, there's a fascinating podcast with Sarah Wayne Callis, the actress who portrays Laurie Grimes, and Jon Bernthal over here on YouTube, in which they discuss the firing of Frank Darabont and the early turmoil in the series. Now, after this video, I can't recommend highly enough that you go and check it out because it's so interesting. But essentially, they talk about how much information was kept from them during the production of the show, and their shock and disappointment when they found out Frank Darabont had been fired. And they even state the writing would have been even better if Frank Darabont stayed on for season 2. Now, I'll play a short clip now.
There are some really good people who've been writing on that show since, and I got a lot of love and respect for them. Nobody writes like Frank Darabont.
That's a whole different level. Yeah.
Hearing the praise many of the people involved in The Walking Dead have for Frank Darabont will always interest me. In some alternate timeline, I would have loved to have seen what he was cooking up in that brain of his, but with the chaos behind the scenes of the show, I mean Jeffrey DeMond, who plays Dale, flat out left the series due to the mess. It staggers me that the cast could come together and create something so magical against all the odds. I mean, on paper, The Walking Dead Season 2 should have been awful and probably its last season, but it wasn't, and it defies all logic. And I think a huge part of that comes down to Jon Bernthal as a person and his portrayal of the character of Shane. Once again, please do go and listen to these podcasts after this video, as they are so intriguing and give an insight into the production of the show. But Jon Bernthal loved The Walking Dead. He believed in the series, much like many of the cast did, and he states that when his character was killed off, he cried. And I think that speaks volumes for how much he gave to the series. Season 2 would ultimately make the show. It would go on for another decade and become a juggernaut in the television space. And after The Walking Dead's messy start to life, it would never look back, building momentum as it went. And I truly believe that's almost entirely down to the professionalism and passion of the cast involved in the early seasons. And whilst this video serves as a celebration of each and every member of said cast, I think Jon Bernthal is the very embodiment of that passion. He loved the series with all of his heart and wanted for it so desperately to succeed, and that's why I believe he saved The Walking Dead. But with that being said, I would like to say a huge thank you for watching today's video. If you did enjoy, please do like and subscribe, as it helps the channel out massively, and we are quickly closing in on 30,000 subscribers. As always, let me know down below in the comments whether you agree or whether you think somebody else saved The Walking Dead as a franchise. And I have also left a link to both podcasts in the description if you want to go and check them out. And once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.